Well, welcome everybody to our December session for our NCRAN. I don't even know what it's called. I apologize. My name is Jackie Caratini, and I'm a Human Development and Relationships Educator with UW-Madison Division of Extension. And today I also have my colleague, Carol. Carol, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Carol Brolick, also with the UW-Madison Division of Extension, Washington County, southeast part of the state.
Awesome. So Carol and I are going to take you today through an introduction to a curriculum that we developed several years ago called Planning Ahead. And so we're going to walk through, we'll go back and forth through some of the basics. In just a second, we will share the link so you can have access to the latest workbook. I'll talk about that a little bit later, how we've made some adaptations and changes. And if you have an older version, this will get you to the most recent version of that. So in just a second, we'll pop that on so everybody will have access if that's something you're curious about as we start off with. So as I said, the curriculum is called Planning Ahead, and this course was created to address most aspects relating to end-of-life topics. We have a total of 7 modules. They are, as you can see, handling financial changes, advanced directives, both medical and legal, estate planning, choices in end-of-life care, final wishes, and understanding grief. And we do have an introductory module that we start off with just called Getting Started. And in just a second, I'll take you through each one of these modules. But the idea is that today we'll give you an overview of this whole process. Each one of these modules is 1 hour in length when you do present it, and it has been presented both virtually and in person. So just to start off and get you thinking, when you think about your own eventual death, what is the most important thing that you'd like to do to ease the transition for your loved ones? So just think about that for a sec. If you want to, go ahead and pop it in the chat. Yeah, so I have a plan ahead, planning to ease the burden for my children. Yeah, absolutely. So when we do teach this, oh yeah, express my wishes. Not having a lot of stuff left over for them to handle, right? Funeral choices, absolutely. You're all right on. Especially if you've had a loss or you've experienced a loss in your family, a lot of times you see how poorly it has gone, and then we don't want that for our loved ones, right? So you guys are right on with the average. So let's kind of look a little bit into what the research does say. So 92, oh, I love technology. 92% of adults say that it is important. They really think it's important to share their wishes. But when we actually say how many have done so, it's about a third. A little over 30% have actually taken action. And taken steps towards any type of pre-planning. When we look more specifically into those details, about 40% have actually set some money aside for long-term care. So thinking about choices in living and where that is at, and about 40% same have signed that healthcare power of attorney. So one of the things we do know, and the research does tell us, is that end-of-life planning is associated with improved well-being. You feel the sense of ease that you've had some things taken care of, and there are other aspects to your overall health that coincide with that. And so there are increased well-being. Oh, I'm Sorry, my technology is not the greatest today. So why did we decide to create the Planning Ahead curriculum? Um, it's really important as we kind of looked into what existed across the country and really see what's out there. It was important for us to acknowledge that it's one of those topics that not a lot of folks talk about. It's very sensitive, and so a lot of people just avoid it altogether. So we also acknowledge that there is so much information when it comes to end of life planning. Like I said, each one of these modules is 1 hour in length. We could probably do a whole series on each one of these modules. And we do get that every time we teach this, that it's an overwhelming amount of information. And so that is part of the reason that we decided to set this up the way that we did, is to help folks get started and actually tackle each one of these topics because they are so daunting. And what we heard is that folks didn't even know where to start. So our curriculum is based on two essential needs. One is for folks to be able to share what their wishes are with their family and loved ones. And two, as many of you said, to ease that transition for those loved ones. I was talking yesterday with someone who had a recent loss in their family, and they said part of this is they they're grieving. They said they didn't realize how much that their process would be hindered because they were grieving, that even though stuff was planned, they're glad they did because they couldn't even think clearly and process. And I thought that was just a really important, valid point to realize that right now we can think, oh, we're so organized, we have stuff. But in the time when your family is really in the depths of grief, the more you have done, the better to help them process and be able to get things done. So a little bit, I'll talk just a brief moment on our process. So again, going back in 2021, we did receive a grant to look into this, and we started by doing research. We spent a year developing, then we did pilot testing, we did focus groups, then we did follow-up calls, then we did something called cards. This is something we do have available in Madison, Wisconsin, and it is a community research support network, and so we were able to give it back to them. They gave us detailed feedback, and then we were able to take that, make additional adaptations. A little bit later, I'll talk more in depth about the Hmong community. One of our pilots was with the Hmong community in Central or Southeast Asian population in in Central Wisconsin. And so we got some specific input on that. And we'll talk a little bit later what that actually ended up being. So then we were able to do a facilitator training in the spring of 2022, and then actually launched that curriculum. So some of the things that we did here and some of the adaptations that we made specifically from that cards group, which was the Community Advisors on Research Design and Strategies. And like I said, they gave us some very specific feedback. So some of those recommendations, said to add places to contact for mental health support, make it relevant to all ages. So when we talk about specifically some of the things, we think of end of life planning. Hopefully, most of us will be older, right? Aged at older adults, but that's not where we're at with this curriculum, especially when it comes to some of the advanced directives. We know here in Wisconsin, and also know this was written specifically for the state of Wisconsin. So if you're in a different state, you might need to check with your state laws. But here in Wisconsin, especially for some of the advanced directives, once someone is 18, they're considered an adult. And so they need to have their forms filled out for their wishes to be shared and to follow through on. So that's really important. So when we say make it relevant for all ages, that is why that was a very valid suggestion. We talk about, or they suggested to talk about navigating housing transitions, making it easier to read. So we went back and adapted that glossary, and that actually was done twice. So this was for the first round. All of these suggestions were on the first round of edits. And then this summer, in the fall of 2023, after a year of actually utilizing the curriculum, we went back and made another round of edits this past summer. So we made it clear twice with that, with specifically when it comes to terms, the glossary, examples, using plain language, all of that. So I'm going to take you through each one of the modules. Well, I'll do the first few and then I'll turn it over to Carol. So the first module was getting started. Like I said, this is an overview of the curriculum. One of the things we heard loud and clear from participants and the focus groups was that folks really didn't know where to start. Remember, I said that was one of the barriers in the beginning of our overall curriculum that we wanted to address was where to even start. So if you have not had a chance to look at it yet, you'll notice that we have many checklists. That was one of the things that was suggested. And through a lot of the evaluation, we found that folks found it was very helpful for them. So this Getting Started module has many checklists. And you will also see at the beginning here, we'll notice this for each one of the modules. There is a brief description, then there is the content of what is there. And they are also color coded. So if I went back to that first slide we had with each one of the modules and they had a color coding on, that is the way our workbook is set up. So that if you were utilizing this, you could know that I could go to the orange and that's advanced directives, or I could go to the green and that is financial planning. So it's quick and easy for folks to kind of flip through. So this first module is really about helping folks organize their thoughts, where are they at, doing some self-reflection. So this one, although it is an overview, it also is very deep because it takes a lot of thought to think about where are you at in your planning process? What are your wishes? What do you want? And then again, developing, there's a lot of checklists and tools that are there to help you organize not only your wishes, but then getting them in a place so that you can share that information with your family and loved ones. So let's dive a little bit further into that workbook. So some additional checklists that are in that first section. There is an end of life planning checklist that takes you through, again, each one of those sections. So it starts off with, again, getting started, where, like I said, some of the introductory things, there is a glossary, there is your personal contacts, where are you at in your process? There's a specific sheet for codes. If you're like most of us, our life is digital now. So there is a sheet for organizing all of your digital codes and passwords, locations of documents where things are at, so we can direct loved ones to where they're at. And then it does take you in this first section through each one of those modules and what are the steps in each one of those modules. So that's all on this first end of life overall planning checklist. Some additional checklists that are in that one. This is a new one that was added this year. So if you saw our previous version, but it's one of my favorites, deathbed secrets that you shouldn't keep. And it usually gets kind of a small chuckle from everybody because they're like, oh yeah, that's right. So I do encourage you to look at that. Then there also is following the death of a loved one, some basic steps to plan. And then, as I mentioned, contacts. So who have you chosen as your personal representative? What are your emergency contacts? Again, many of you said, and what we also heard from our data collection is that folks want to ease that transition. So the more organized that we can be, and even telling folks where to start. The other nice thing is that this workbook is digital, so you can fill it out online, or we also give folks a paper copy. So it's nice to just have it all in one place. So I always tell folks when we're teaching, say where that book is. You don't have to give them all the information now, but if you can say, when something happens to me, this book or these checklists are in, the bottom of my sock drawer, right? Or, they're in just, secured location. So someone knows where all of this information is. So we do talk a lot about that too, how to start having these conversations and how to share that information. The next one is handling financial changes. So this one, as you can see from the contents, pretty lengthy, but we do talk about as you transition through life and plan for changes, it's important to plan for home finances, right? So whether you are experiencing that loss of a loved one or just as you transition through life, this section or this module helps you organize yourself and really think about the impacts on your finances that some of those life changes may have, and help you think about the future. So this also helps it make a little more manageable and not as daunting when the time does come, and you do have to implement some of these changes. We also do talk here, so some things are introduced in this module, but they'll talk a little bit more in later modules as well. And that would be thinking about the costs related to a funeral, and then also a little bit about long-term care insurance. Again, that comes up here. So many of the topics, as I didn't say this, but in the first module, they'll be introduced and then they'll pop up in later modules as well. And so you don't just hear them once, you'll hear them multiple times throughout the series. The objectives for the financial module, again, is it really starts off with folks thinking about a spending plan and where they're at. There is a worksheet for them to think about possible changes that might occur to their income or expenses. There are several articles that are included that are around planning a funeral, funeral costs, thinking about housing choices, and then again, what happens to our financial accounts when someone does die. We also, one of the activities in this module is to have participants rank their personal financial security goals. So we do talk a little bit about goals, and then have them reflect on those goals, and then thinking about their current spending, and then what those changes would be in their spending and how that would impact those goals. And so depending where anyone is at in their life stage and throughout their life, that might be different. So we talk several times throughout the series about when we'll introduce it a little bit later, but we'll call it the 6 Ds. But when there has been significant changes in your life, so a death, a change in domicile or a house, new diagnosis, a decline in health. So any of those, we tell people new decade to go back and look at and specifically think about even financial changes and what those impacts might be. Additional, this is just an example of what those expense worksheets look like. Again, they were changed a little bit to make them a little bit clearer through some of our edits. Module 3 is advanced directives. So during this one, we do talk about advanced medical and legal directives, mostly about medical advanced directives. Again, I encourage you to realize that this is based on the state of Wisconsin and our laws. So this is really around that. Again, if you are in another state, or we always tell folks, because we're in, the land of cold, if you winter in another state, or, if you head south or you're a snowbird, to realize what or look into what those laws are for that state around estate planning as well. So we do talk specifically about advanced directives. Again, some changes were made to this. So if you saw an earlier version, we really try to make it clear to help folks understand the pieces that are of the advanced directives, what is legally required in the state of Wisconsin, and then also how to think about it. So if you look at this graphic, the second graphic we added here really has you think about that it's split into 2 parts. So part of it is the legal part. So we do legally have to have forms. One of the things that's important for folks in Wisconsin to know is that Wisconsin is not a next of kin state. So you might be, what does that mean? Not a next of kin state. What that means is if you do not have your advance directive forms filled out, the medical team is not legally required to consult with the family before making decisions. So if you are deemed incapacitated or you're not able to make your medical decisions for you, they're not legally required to automatically talk to your loved ones. Now, before you jump in and try to disagree with me, many of our health systems we have found throughout the state of Wisconsin have said that it's their policy to consult with the family, but again, they're not legally required. So this is why it's important for us to make sure that we do have these forms filled out and that we do stress that. The other component of this is what's important to you. So that's part of before you can actually go in and fill out the advance directive forms, we really talk about what are your wishes. And as many of the topics throughout this series, it takes some self-reflection. So we do talk about in every module, making sure you take care of yourself, give yourself grace because things might come up as you're thinking about this. But before you fill out these forms, you do have to think about what are my wishes? What is important to me? Do I want to be kept alive, via tube fed? Or if my heart or lungs stop working, do I want a machine to do that for me? So we go through each one of these steps, and what are some of those questions, and help you think about what are those choices that you may want to make as you're thinking about um, filling out those forms for advance directive. The other thing that we do emphasize in advance directives is that, again, specifically in the state of Wisconsin, but many states, they do have to be legally signed and witnessed. So I encourage you to look up what your state laws are for that. In Wisconsin, it cannot be anyone that is related to you in any way. So that is important. So a lot of times that's a vital fact that's overlooked. So again, if like maybe your grandson signed and witnessed your documents, they might not, when the time came, be deemed legal because that person is related to you. So it's important that they not be related to you by blood, adoption, or any relative at all. So again, we provide many resources. In Wisconsin, we do link back to the state of Wisconsin because the things change and they are legal documents. So in this, it's really important that we talk about, again, utilizing the checklist, how to have conversations. So much of this module is how to start the conversations with your loved ones. So thinking about what your wishes are and then how to express those. We also talk about how to choose that healthcare power of attorney, that financial power of attorney. What are some of those thought processes that might go into, and we also acknowledge that it does not have to be the same person for your healthcare or your financial power of attorney. So there also is a video. Several of our modules do have videos. This one does have a brief video that talks about advanced directives and helps explain what advanced directives are.
All right, thank you, Jackie. I'll go on to the next, unless you have any other comments from
Nope,
the
you're
previous
good.
module. All right. All right, so we're almost halfway through there, and I'm going to move into the next module, which is on estate planning. So similarly to advanced directives, each state also has laws regarding what happens to your estate if you don't have those plans in place. So in my mind, what I've seen in facilitating this, modules 3 and 4 can get quite particular, I guess. And again, according to state laws, there's a lot of nuances. There's a lot of folks that have and maybe want to share their particular situation. We try not to get into the weeds too much, but realizing that every situation is a little different. So we try to really focus on the main things that they want to know and understand, again, the definitions, and also thinking about how to have those conversations. And also this can, with estate planning, this can really be a slow and costly process that can cause some stress for families after a loved one passes if they don't have, though, if the loved one did not have those plans in place. So this module really discusses those options for making and putting those, for making a plan for your estate, okay? As we kind of look at the objectives, the section also includes tips on choosing representatives and power of attorney and steps to making a will. So within that, what are the components of a will? And then part of that is also avoiding what's called probate, which I think most of you probably are aware of. But I think sometimes those nuances and particulars with probate can be a little confusing. So we try to go through some of those basics, but we also share that this may be a time, depending upon how complex your situation is, to involve an attorney. So we're not replacing the role of the attorney, but we're really trying to help educate folks so that they have enough background that they can have productive conversations with those attorneys. Um, and then also, we also discuss things and the differences between tangible and intangible property. You know, which things would you list in the will, which things can just be added as a memorandum of property. So there's different ways of approaching different items that they may have in their possessions. Again, similarly, individuals are really encouraged to consider who they might ask to be that personal representative. Asking things like, you know, is this person a good communicator? Do they live out of state? Will that make a difference as they're trying to take care of putting things in order? Do they really want to do it? And do they feel competent doing that? Because you really do, again, want someone who is more of that advocate role for you in either of these situations with estate planning and advanced directives. So I'm kind of lumping that a little bit together. So again, just objectives, we're really emphasizing that importance of pre-planning, where the distribution of your property will go, understanding the different documents that are available for estate planning, and really just understanding some of those glossary terms. And I think Jackie mentioned, and if not, there is that glossary that you can look back for those terms, which can be really helpful to understand some of the basic components. And then also that personal representative role. So kind of the knowledge, kind of the who is going to be, you know, working through the process, and then getting that help through an attorney if necessary as well. All right, then we're going to move on to Module 5, which is choices in end of life care. And Jackie, when you're ready, go ahead and do that. Thank you. So a couple questions for you. Do you know the difference between palliative care and hospice? So some folks do, some folks may not, just because they haven't had that life experience with anybody in their family or friends. And maybe they haven't had to make those kinds of health care decisions for someone. So in this module, we are defining each of those options. And in this module also, there are short video clips that help folks understand the difference between palliative and hospice care, and really go through the benefits of each when it comes to those end of life options. So as they're working on their paperwork, they can make the decisions that they feel most comfortable with, and in talking with their family about that. So the workbook also features informational charts on the differences between palliative care and hospice care as well. And the similar, you know, they both really have to do with the comfort of that person, but there's differences in how if there's a curative component or not, or if it's just comfort only. So those differences, it helps when folks need to talk to their physicians about this. Another consideration when making end-of-life decisions is looking through your own cultural, spiritual beliefs and practices. Again, some more self-reflection that really helps you in doing the planning. So participants are asked to do this self-reflection on what their cultural or spiritual beliefs and backgrounds tell them about death, and what that means to them when they express their final wishes. So it's helpful on two fronts. It's helpful for themselves to think through, but it's also helpful as they approach and maybe know folks from another culture, and if they are going to participate in end-of-life memorials, celebrations, and so on, to kind of understand what that means to that person and their family. So kind of creating that awareness. So we kind of talk about it from both sides that way. So into doing this, there's a chart in the workbook where we give an overview of a variety of beliefs and practices that really may affect your choices about death, dying, and funerals. So it's not every religious belief or every cultural representation on this chart, but just gives an idea of those differences, and to bring, again, that awareness to that. So for example, many people believe that the Catholic Church did not approve of cremation. Well, that may have been true at one point. Now, as long as the majority of the ashes are buried in a blessed cemetery, it is approved. So you're going to see some of those pieces laid out, and it offers some conversation points, I guess, that you can start with your family and friends as well. Okay, so moving on, then related, but maybe more reflective in nature. Module 6 is about final wishes. So you'll find handouts that help guide someone through the process of thinking about and writing down their final wishes. So it's a series of questions, and they're not just yes no questions. You're going to notice they're very open ended. They kind of probe a little bit and get you really thinking about what do I want? What are my wishes? And what do I want my family to realize and have happen during that time? So documenting your final wishes for a funeral, whether it's a burial or cremation, really is important. And in addition to celebrations of life, can be in the form of sometimes a legacy project that's created before the end of life for family members, and also at memorials that can offer that chance to say goodbye, honor the memory of someone that has died. So legacy projects are, that you've probably seen as you've attended memorials or celebrations of life, may include things like, photo collages, right? That's something that a lot of folks do because it really helps folks process memories that they've had for their loved one. We also ask participants to think back to a memorial that they have attended and think about what made it special, what stood out for you, and having them think about someone else and attending a different memorial service. It really may be helpful for them to think about what they want to share with family members and some of their final wishes that they'd have. So then with the objectives for this module, we want to increase that knowledge of how to make decisions around end of life and those planning for memorial and funeral preferences, and just understanding some of the differences between traditional and other cultures as well. Definitions as well. All those definitions, sometimes that basic knowledge really is important. On the next slide, you're going to see the funeral planning checklist. And really the piece of note with this is that there's little asterisks or stars by quite a few of those pieces that you can do ahead of time. So some of these things you can, it doesn't have to be like, towards the end of maybe in hospice and things like that, because by that point, sometimes you're not necessarily thinking about your wishes, or someone's maybe not able to do that as well. So where those stars are, asterisks, really think about what can I put down now to help my family plan for whether it's a funeral, celebration of life, so that they feel prepared and they can do this without being overwhelmed with everything that's going on. So just different, a checklist to help with that again. So lots of checklists. Yeah. All right, so then we go into module 7, which is our last module, and it really starts pulling out some of the emotional sides, right, of end of life planning and just preparing for some of the things that they might be going through. A lot of participants have gone through some type of grief, whether they're all different kinds, and even within a session that I was doing with my co-facilitator, she, in addition to thinking about our loved ones, a very close pet had passed away. So, there's a lot of different types of grief that are out there. And I think everyone can learn and benefit from this module as well. So again, just kind of thinking about grief in and of itself, there's really no right or wrong way to experience this grief. In the section, there are handouts explaining the different kinds of grievers, if you're more of an emotional griever or more, kind of a factual kind of griever and need to do something to feel better, and how you can draw on your own strengths to support yourself as well as the others in that time of grief. We also show a short Brene Brown video clip on empathy that really shows examples of being supportive, but also the not so good examples that in kind of a light, humorous way that helps us think back, like, oh, yeah, maybe some things I've said in the past maybe aren't the things that are most helpful for someone to hear. So it really helps people pause and think as they have interactions with someone who is in that grieving process. And so as we look at those objectives, again, increasing some understanding about empathy, a knowledge about the grief process and how sometimes it isn't always cyclical, so the stages kind of can move up and down, identifying some typical coping mechanisms, and that's part of drawing on our strengths. And then also just having a better understanding of resources that are out there to support. So when we do our planning ahead series, if it's within a certain county or certain region, we do tend to pull in local resources or regional resources, as well as statewide or national resources, because it just gives them a place where they can go to if they need some of those coping mechanisms and folks to share that with. Okay, I'm just going to do a quick pause. That was the last brief, very brief, of going over some of the modules. Are there any questions on some of the pieces of that? You can pop those in the chat if you do, in case you missed something or weren't quite sure if you heard something correctly. I'm not seeing anything right away, but if you do have those questions, pop them in the chat. And I'm just going to keep moving on to evaluation. Okay. So evaluation, of course, is very important and was part of the planning when planning ahead was put into effect. There was a series about a year of pilot sessions and then feedback from those participants, including some agency folks as well. And so some of the data that'll be on the next couple of slides are really from April of 2022. So we have the post-course survey, and we also had the 3-month follow-up survey. So the program evaluation included, with the post-course survey, questions around whether participants feel they have a greater knowledge from each module. So we're working on knowledge. If they felt more confident in having those conversations, so really emphasize that piece as well. And if they know where to find those resources. So we're trying to hit all 3 of those things as people participate in that. Participants also have the opportunity to indicate if they would like more information and what goals they have related to the end of life planning in the next 3 months. And then also, if they indicated their emails, then they are mailed that follow-up survey. So the slide that's currently up here now are some of the findings since April of 2022, and that was launched from the post-course survey. Okay. So as you look at this, you're going to see that with our number of about 163 surveys, 98% indicated they learned enough to move forward with planning. And remember, at the beginning, Jackie was talking about getting started is sometimes the hardest part, right? So to see this 98% that they learn enough to move forward is just huge and motivating to us to really see that, yeah, this is important for folks to know about. 88% more confidence in having those conversations with loved ones related to end of life wishes. Again, huge hurdle for folks to get over sometimes with the holidays coming up. And, some people may think, oh, I don't want to bring this up during the holidays, but you know what? It probably is one of the best times. And I even had my co-facilitator for this course said that she asked her husband for Christmas to fill out all their advanced directives. And I think this was a couple years ago, and they did it. Maybe not quite by the end of Christmas, but they got it done the next month or two. So showing how important it is to have those conversations. And she said that was the best gift that he could have given. So putting things in that light, I think also helps people motivate towards doing some of those things. 93% know where to find reliable resources for more information on end-of-life planning. As we've been saying, this is just this comprehensive overview with all these different topics related to end-of-life planning. So we need to make sure that their folks and participants are getting reliable resources that they can move forward with then too, and feel that they can count on. So in that same post-session survey or post-course survey, this is what they indicated. Oops, not quite, Jackie. Thank you. A lot on this slide. In the next 3 months, folks said that 17% plan to make their end-of-life wishes known, so kind of moving them forward. 16% will update, and that's a key piece there. Some of our participants, I was surprised at some that were older that participated, thinking, oh, they probably have all this taken care of, but some either didn't have it taken care of, or they're like, whoa, I need to go in there and make some updates. So to me, that second bullet, there's 16%. That's awesome that people are willing and wanting to do that too. Some are looking at estate planning pieces. Some also encouraging others to do this planning, and then also setting up those advanced directives. All right, Jackie, sorry about that. Doing a lot of talking. We're going to go to that next slide, which is on the follow-up results. So from those original participants that did the first evaluation, about 45 completed this follow-up one, which was 3 to 4 months after end of course. Okay, and this slide also really shows some promising results from the surveys there. So the first 2 lines show the change in percentage of those participants who were actively planning for end of life before taking planning ahead and are currently actively planning 3 to 4 months after the course. So this shows that participants are continuing to work on their planning. So it was at about 38%, and now it's at that 95%. So that's awesome as far as the increase in that percentage. So again, very promising results there. 95.5% have taken some planning action since the course. And then the remaining lines show the percentage of those who have self-reported specific actions, such as communicating with a loved one, gathering information, looking at changes in finances to come, and then also working on at least one advanced directive. So again, you kind of think about where we were at the previous slide with the intentions. Now we're seeing, after the follow-up results, we're seeing some really good percentages for folks that have started doing some of those activities for planning ahead. So very encouraged. The next slide, just to give you a flavor of some of our qualitative examples, just a few there. The course helped me draw all the end-of-life actions into a neat, organized package. So creating a living looks like that was cut off. So it was about a living trust. Not sure what happened there. But I think the key there is that really putting it into a package where you don't have, your estate planning over here and your wishes over here, kind of finding a way, how can we put this in one spot to help out our family, and also also for yourself too. Please keep this information in people's faces. It is a difficult matter to discuss, and many people would like to shove it under the rug. It is so important. So focusing on that conversation, right? The importance. And in the last one, I really think this is a great opportunity to learn and think about a topic that can be uncomfortable. So pushing us out of our comfort zones, having that growth and those conversations with our families and possibly even friends. Okay, so next steps, we have some things continuing. So obviously curriculum updates using evaluation data and focus groups. We've actually been doing a lot of that the past, I would say, 4 or 5 months. And the link that you received to that workbook, that link is a product of all of that work. So it really involves looking at feedback from evaluations, talking with facilitators, and how things went, updating anything that needed to be updated, if there was a law change, which I don't think there was much of that, just making sure all of those things were up to date. Also, Jackie will be talking a little bit more right after this slide, but that second point, alongside current planning ahead program, there's a team of colleagues that are working with UW-Madison School of Nursing to create a culturally relevant Hmong version. And then we also have a community of practice where those trained facilitators come together and just kind of share what's been working well, what are some challenges they've been having, and just trying to work those things out. And that definitely came into the feedback piece of making some changes as well. In addition, Extension has provided a second training for Extension educators in 2023, and we now have about 20 trained educators and several community partners. In my case, my co-facilitator is with our Aging and Disability Resource Center housed within my county. So bring in her expertise with advanced directives and some of the other topics as well. So now Jackie is going to talk a little bit more about that adaptation.
Thanks, Carol. Earlier, I mentioned that one of the things we identified fairly early on in our initial focus groups was the need with the Hmong population. If you're not familiar, this is a Southeast Asian population that's fairly significant in the state of Wisconsin. I think we have the second largest population in the country. And so definitely some issues, but one of the things they noticed, and this relates not just to Hmong, but also other languages, is that some of the verbiage just doesn't translate. So if I say something like advanced directives, I say those two words, it might take someone who's translating 5 minutes to describe advanced directives because there is no actual word for advanced directives. So that was kind of the impetus for this, and then it just kind of grew into another project of its own. Um, and so we did partner with Dr. Maichu Lor from UW-Madison School of Nursing to receive another additional grant in 2022. We did hire 8 students that were Hmong bilingual, and they did a series of interviews throughout the state with the Hmong community. Then we took that feedback. We went through it, and then we made adaptations to the curriculum. It's not a direct translation, so it's a little different than just saying we translated something, because that's not, we realized that that really wasn't going to work. Again, partially because words didn't translate, but then also because there were a lot of other needs. So one of the things we learned specifically is that the Hmong language, like many other languages, is a storytelling language. So we really needed to make it much more easy for folks to understand. So instead of just briefly talking about something, we added a lot more examples. There are a lot more graphics, and really turning it more into the storytelling process that correlated with the Hmong community. It made it much more how they normally do things, so it fit. So we did again take feedback and evaluation, and that was completed this summer, and then it was launched in September. And so we will continue our next steps. We are currently applying for additional grant funding. And the next steps with that is to actually create videos, so to go along with the curriculum. So again, that's one of the things we know is that it's having access to someone who speaks the language, and then the competency to be able to do it is not always there, especially in some of our more rural communities throughout Wisconsin. So again, having those videos with someone who is speaking the same language to help them go through the information is very beneficial. So that is on our next steps. Just to give you an example of what this looks like. One of the things we did is we do have families in both of these curriculums, but in our Hmong curriculum, it's Tuashua and Blong. So introduce you to their family. And so in each one of the modules, we come back to Tuashua and Blong and to give an example of what this would look like for them. So instead of just introducing the information, we put it into an example that folks can understand. So again, this really helps when we're working not only with language barriers, but with elders where, again, that word might not even exist. So it's more than just translating. It's really how do we explain something so that they can understand. And again, a lot of these are legal forms. So when we're talking about things like advanced directives, this is a form. We can't change that form. And the forms may be available. Wisconsin has them in many languages, so that's great. But it's a little bit beyond that. So again, this current adaptation is really about helping the community utilize this curriculum a little bit easier and making it more in a format that's more accessible for them, and helping them be able to implement it. So just in conclusion, If you are looking again, we gave you the link for the workbook. If you have any additional questions, we are going to refer you to our two program managers, Sarah Ritchie, who is on today, and then also Jenny Abel. So you can contact either one of them. If you're a QR code person, the QR code will take you right to our website, which does have all of the most up-to-date information and materials. And so that link will stay the same. So as we do make changes, you can go back and it'll take you to that. So if you have any questions relating to this curriculum, implementation, future grants or research or where we're going with that, again, I would direct them to both Sarah and Jenny, and they'll be able to help you. And again, Sarah's on today. If you have any specific questions, we'll pause in just a sec for questions. So lastly, we wanted to just show you what that homepage looked like. So if you do go to our Planning Ahead page, this is what it does look like. So it comes up. If you would click on the participant materials, it'll take you to that workbook. It is in a downloadable format so that you can fill it out online. There's also a printable version, so you can take it either way. And we found that it's about 50-50 for folks, depending where their technology level is. Some want it as a fillable format that they can keep editing as they go, again, because we learned that this is a process, right? So as Carol showed with some of that evaluation data, it's just completing one piece because we know that the whole picture is so daunting. So having that editable version is very helpful for folks, but some folks just want a paper version. They want to be able to have it in their hands. So you can get either one of those, and those are available for anyone. So you can click on that and have access to that. At this point, the facilitator materials are only available to those who have been trained in the state of Wisconsin. We are planning to take that out hopefully early next year, mid next year, and open it up for additional training outside of the state of Wisconsin. So keep on a lookout for that. And then we also have their upcoming classes. So we do, like I said, a version of in person. Some folks do it in person, and then we also have some virtual ones. And then we also offer some statewide ones throughout the state of Wisconsin that anybody can attend. So we open those up. So Carol gave a great example of partnering with her local ADRC. So utilizing local resources within our community. And then, like I said, we have some that are just statewide. If it's especially a very small rural community where there isn't an educator providing this, they can access it through some of those statewide offerings. I will pause there. Questions, comments?
I have a quick question. So for people that are interested in getting trained when the training becomes available, do you think it will be an in-person training or a virtual training, or what are you thinking?
Sarah, do you want to take that?
Yeah, well, we've been talking a lot about how to best move forward in this space. I think we've done virtual trainings with our educators, so I think virtual is doable. I think we're at a point right now where we're exploring our options because our evidence is quite strong that this actually program leads to behavior change. So we're considering the possibilities of working towards making this an evidence-based curriculum. So we really need to be intentional as we move forward and how we're offering trainings, how we're adopting the curriculum, things like that. So our next steps are to really work on that facilitator manual and training, and then potentially seek some funding and test in other states or do some pilot testing before it's like really opened up. But yeah, I mean, I think a virtual training is just as good as an in-person training. So it would not be as costly, for our staff to do an in-person training. So again, all things that we're in the process of trying to figure out, because we've not really, at least those of us involved in the project, and I think, we've had leadership change over the years, we haven't really explored this yet. So if your states have done these things, I might be reaching out to some of my NCRAN partners to figure out how you do this. So.
And just
Great
one quick question about how you offer this. So it sounds like you've had grant funding in the past, and maybe that supplemented the implementation of the program, so you could offer it at no cost or low cost. But how do you plan on doing that in the future? Do you plan on charging people for it, or do you think do people pay to attend? I guess I'm just curious about that part.
We've been offering it for free, and our cost is basically printing the workbook. The workbook was designed to be used digitally, so it's fillable. Some participants don't want a workbook. Right now, we've been able to supplement the cost of the workbook through some of our state budget or county budgets, and some, educators have been able to like use their partnerships within their county government or local communities to print at a much lesser cost than we print at the state. So, or within the university. So, I don't know that we really ever plan on charging. We don't charge for many of our programs in Wisconsin. Some counties do have a revenue requirement, but not very many. So I don't know, Jack, you guys have not charged for any, right? Yeah.
No. And again, Carol and I were just talking about this yesterday, just really looking at different ways to print, being cost effective. Many counties printing in-house is much cheaper than utilizing our publications through the state. So just been kind of creative. I know some county partners, that's part of the partnership. So whether it's a local senior center or the ADRC, they want to step in and give additional funding. They're part of the partnership for printing the book. But yeah, at this point, the only cost is printing those materials, and we've been able to keep that fairly low. Other questions?
There, I'm seeing a question in the chat that I think you could address. Do you plan to, or would there be a fee to adopt in another state?
So part of our discussions that we've been having is offering this because we've presented in a few national conferences and platforms now. And there's a lot we did not, I guess, anticipate the interest that we would get from our extension colleagues across the country. So now we're in this phase of like, how do we do this? How can we offer this? We spent a lot of time being intentional with the development and the piloting of the program. And we do intend to work towards creating sort of customizable programming so that the portions of the curriculum that need to be customized regarding state laws and things like that will be adaptable for different states. It's just, we're still trying to figure out how to do all of that. I think in January, our team is going to be meeting to kick that off. So I guess be patient. And again, we are open to hearing any advice if anybody's been through this or done anything similar.
Awesome. Just to conclude, we have just a minute left. We've moved through a lot of information today, and I know this can feel overwhelming as we think about it for ourselves, but then also from the perspective of teaching this. So we always encourage folks, if stuff comes up, to take care of yourself and really give yourself that grace, but also, realize that death is a part of life that we all have to face. And the more that we know about our options, the more that we can be prepared and our wishes will be followed through on and honored. So Lastly, real brief, just to give credit to those who were authors on this curriculum. And like I said, it has been a process throughout the last couple of years. So we've had different folks pop on for different pieces in additional grants as this kind of grows. And as Sarah said, it will continue to grow. So last questions. Otherwise, thank you for participating with us today.